hitting red. You should see, let's see if we can get this online. It says it's online. Let me go ahead and refresh this real quick. Okay. Loading. Can you check it out on LinkedIn real quick? Okay, I'm seeing us. I'm seeing it recording. Let me refresh on LinkedIn. Holy moly. I need to do better.
Are you live on LinkedIn now?
I am seeing it live.
Okay. So give me a second here. I'm just on there right now.
But there's going to be a new, if you're on there, can you text everybody and say there should be a new live stream probably? Let me see. No, let me see if I can get in there.
Okay, so we can hear the volume.
Perfect. That's hilarious. Okay, but that means we have 2 people in this live stream. Let me go ahead and work with OBS because I've officially chopped off our heads now. All right, there we go. Okay, so apologies, guys. I think John Phillips, welcome. I am also excited for this. I think, is that Mark Fruchtbaum on as well? We had about 7 other people, ran into some technical difficulties. We did change, or I changed locations at least. So this training, basically I was running off my Wi-Fi, and I think actually, now that I remember correctly, we're sitting at about 2 megs per second. And so I switched to my iPhone hotspot, and it's actually doing a much better job. So apologies for that delay. And we're going to go ahead and kick this off. Thank you, John Phillips, for that. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Yeah, I don't know if they hear me online right now. I just see a spinning wheel on my side. On LinkedIn. Yeah, I think it's trying to buffer and trying to refresh.
Yeah. I am not seeing this going well at the moment. It says it's green on OBS. It says it's green on Restream.
Can everyone hear us okay on, we can hear you. Can
I think
hear
there's
both?
only 2. I think we lost everybody else. Oh, Paul Davison said he can hear us. Millie Moore says we can hear you both. Okay, so I think we're gonna kick off then. I think we lost a few people in the mix. Can you go ahead and try to see who we have on here real quick? And real quick, roll call. Will you guys put your city and state for where you guys are around the world real quick as we kick this off? Let's just see where we have listeners from, and then we want to get into the content because we've got a lot for this show too. Once again, this is Brandon Krieger. My name is Joel Bork. I switched from LinkedIn to YouTube. Sean, thank you for doing that. I don't know why LinkedIn was having issues. I know we were running into some bandwidth issues. So if you are on LinkedIn, you may want to switch over to YouTube, and I apologize. I think that bandwidth issue is on my end. So for a second week in a row, Brandon, I failed you.
No failing. Anyone here that works in technology knows this is the things that we run into, right? Right. This is what we kind of go into, little troubleshooting, all that. It takes at least 4 or 5 episodes to get it going, to get all the kind of the cobwebs out. So no worries on my side.
Deal. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I don't know if they heard us, but guys, if you are on here, Mark is saying the audio is a little, he said choppy, but audio video good. Okay. Sorry about the choppiness. I wish I had a fix that could help. So what you may want to do is actually let this buffer a little bit on YouTube and come back and watch it once we record. It looks like we are set. Brandon, do we just keep going? I'm sorry about the bandwidth, buddy.
Let's go.
Okay, sounds good.
If everyone can hear us, okay, we're gonna get going, and then just let, you guys have the chat windows. Joel, you have both Twitch, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Is that correct?
I think I turned off Twitch for this one just to save on some bandwidth.
Okay, but we have LinkedIn and YouTube.
Yep.
Okay, so if you guys have any questions or comments as we're going through, we're watching the actual chats. So let us know what you think. Any comments as we're going along. This is a shared cybersecurity study group, study live. So this is not just us kind of relaying information to you guys and downloading on you guys. This is a group kind of study group that we're going to be working together to give you guys some information, real world experiences, what we're going through, and hear from you guys, what you guys are seeing, so we can all prepare for the CISSP. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some people in the group right now that are CISSPs, right, that are listening to us. Give us your feedback, give us kind of what you're doing in the real world and what you're seeing, because then that helps us as a community kind of understand how this relates, how this material relates to what we're doing and what we're working on and how we're studying, versus just kind of, theoretical. All right. What do you think, Joel?
Yeah, no, I agree. And we were supposed to actually have a guest on this week. I think it's going to be happening next week, but we're definitely excited to bring that individual on. They're going to give us much more insight into the legal side and how cybersecurity and the legal system are paired together. And yeah, there's no way around that one, but we wanted to get somebody with real world experience to really dig into the details and give you those real world experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's really good to bring up. We're going to have, you guys know any CISSP experts, any ones that are in the field, send Joel a message, right? And let him know who if it's yourself or someone send him a message. We'll start to plan out who we're going to have on for which domains and which areas. And then we're going to have them talk about those areas of expertise that they're specialized in. So it kind of helps to kind of give not just the content, but real world scenarios, how these guys are doing it.
Absolutely. So real quick, Brandon, we want to give you guys a quick recap. Let's go 2 minutes or less of what we hit on last week. Mind if I jump into it, Brandon?
Sure, go ahead.
Awesome. Let's do it. So we jumped into the CIA triad, which consists of confidentiality, which is keeping data restricted to those authorized to see it. Integrity, which is the assurance that information has been protected against alteration. And then availability, which is insurances that the data is available, backups have been taken and tested, and the hardware has been maintained. Then we dug into a few genealogy-related data breaches and how they applied to that triad. What else am I missing, Brandon?
Sensitivity, criticality, concerns, secrecy, privacy, seclusion, isolation, kind of different areas of classification. We went into that as well. I think it was good to kind of go over, like you said, the real world scenarios, ancestry.com. You've covered the CIA triad, which was really important. We covered the 3 A's, authentication, authorization, accountability. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we covered. Due diligence and due care. Right, non-repudiation we covered. So covered quite a bit last episode, right? So, and then I think you covered defense in depth.
Yeah, we did. We went over defense in depth, and then we even got into some due diligence, due care, right? So we did get into that as well. So I think that's a great quick recap. Once again, that's just 1.1 and 1.2 of the first domain for the CISSP exam. What we're jumping in today is 1.3, but before we do that, we wanted to talk about a few of the resources we're using. One of the main resources is the CISSP Study Guide, 3rd edition, by Eric Conrad, Seth Messinar, and Joshua Fiedman. Now, Brandon, I know you're using Safari Books Online, right?
Yeah, I'm using 3 resources, right? The Safari Books Online with those books that you just talked about on there. So depending on what resource you're using, you can follow along with us and just keep going through this. Now, just to recap, we're covering today is 1.2, not 1.3. Right? Just because we're covering evaluation of applied security governance and principles. Just so everyone that's following us and it has the framework of the CISSP study guide and what you're doing, we're going to go over the 1.2 today. That's it. And I think I did say 1.3, so I apologize. Now, next week, Brandon, I'm going to come back to you guys. I'm also using the mobile application CISSP Prep. So I am going to come back and ask you guys how you did on that, what you guys thought of it, and what kind of scores you were getting. So please, please, please jump into that application. It's free like prep test questions, and just take some of those when you're in a waiting room. Hopefully when you're sitting in traffic, you could do that too. But take some of the questions from the last 2. Hold on, Joel. I mean, if you're sitting in traffic and you're driving, don't play with your device. So we want to put that out there. That's fair. Cool. We're talking about legalities next episode, and then it's all of a sudden it's us, right? You got me there. Yep. Let's retract that statement. We're on the hot seat. Don't take this exam on your phone while driving.
definitely take it in the waiting room while you're getting your tires changed, though. Cool.
There you go.
So, Brandon, let's go ahead and jump right in. This is 1.2 CISSP prep, alignment of security function to business strategy, goals, mission, and objectives. So this is really about taking cybersecurity and putting a business mindset with it. Now, Brandon, you actually got into an argument this week with the CISSP on how most people aren't doing that. Am I right?
Well, what was the conversation has, and I want you guys to comment this, that's watching this right now. Most of the CISSPs that are studying, not the ones that are doing day to day, don't think top down approach. They actually think about, the different domains in IT and solutions, and they're thinking the IT mindset. So the bottom up approach, where they're not thinking a lot of times in a business mindset when we're looking at board of directors, senior management, C-suite, and the people that you have to talk to at that level, which this really covers this area, this section in this domain is really to think about high level top down approach. Right. And we got an argument because the guy was like, the CISSP is a garbage exam. And this is his words, not mine. It's a garbage exam. It doesn't teach you how to think like a business owner. It doesn't teach you how to think in business strategies. And then when I was talking to him about it, and we started to break it down, I could see him soften up a bit. And I was talking about some of the areas of it where it was really like, okay, this is the areas that it does cover. This is the area. And it takes up to us, the individuals, to get into that mindset, not the actual, training. We have to think about that. And that's why I think it's really key. You and I are doing this is to talk about why it's important, how to use it.
Yeah, and I think he had a point that the exam, right? He said, hey, this is a garbage exam. But let's be honest, like when you're studying for certification, you will get as much out of it as you put into it, right? So if you just want to pass the certification, yeah, you could do that and you could stay very surface level, but that's not why we're here. So let's go ahead and jump right in. When we're talking about security management planning, it's ensuring the proper creation, implementation, and enforcement of security policy. So security management and this planning, it aligns all security functions with the goal, the mission, and the objectives of the organization. So no matter where they're going in their journey for an organization, security management has to be built into that each and every step of the way.
Now, let's kind of quickly just talk about that. Like, what's an example of a goal or an objective of a business when it comes to security?
Yeah, I know. So the company I work for full-time, IronNet, you said goal or objective for security, but one of their goals is to become the most trusted cybersecurity company in the world. Mm-hmm. And for IronNet to achieve that, you can't have any data breaches to become the most trusted cybersecurity company in the world. Therefore, they have brought on a world-class internal monitoring staff to protect our assets, our people, right, and our resources and PII.
So let's talk about a real-world situation. I mean, you got that for security, but what about general companies? Let's talk for example, PCI compliance, right?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Some companies that are looking at credit cards, right? They want to start taking on payments. Right. But they have to have the governance and the policies in place to be able to do that, and all the security measures. Right. And that's written all in their policies and governance to make sure that they're meeting their goals and objectives so they can take on credit card payments. Right. But what does that mean? What's that overall objective? And this is why we're looking at security management planning, ensuring proper creation of the plan on what your goals are for the company. Not just, we want PCI compliance, but why? Why does the company need it? Right. And I think that's, again, the mindset, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so once again, we have to realize that, yes, security can be expensive to build this into each and every piece of your organization. But most of the time, it's less costly than the absence of security, right? And we have to keep that at the forefront of our minds.
For sure. Totally agree. And then I think that's why, for this domain, it's really important to have that mindset, the business mindset in this while you're having this conversation, right? While we're talking about studying this, is to think of how do business owners think? What's the objective with their goals? And I know that one of the points they put here is this includes designing and implementing security based on business case, budget restrictions, scarcity of resources, and a business case is usually a document, argument, or stated position in order to define a need to make a decision or action. So there's some, we're talking about implementing PCI, implementing credit cards. That's a business decision. It's not a security decision. Security is wrapped around it, but the business decision is we need to take credit card payments. But how do we do that? How do we make it secure? And I think this is where it comes into point.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on, right? If you're going to make a business case, you have to have the underlying security that goes along with it, right? And that business case it's going to be that position that you want to take action on. So, that's going to be key when you're taking this exam is you have to put your business hat on, your security hat on, your ethics hat on. There's going to be a lot of hats you have to wear, and that's why we're here.
Awesome.
Cool. So let's go ahead and jump down just a little bit. But when we're talking about long-term business operations, right, we know that resources are limited, right? You're constrained, and you have to get the maximum benefit from any endeavor you guys put forth. So we understand that we keep saying that, okay, security could be expensive, but the reality is you can still do this in a business where you have security underlying all of these goals and objectives, and you can still have a frugal mindset. We're not pulling that off the table, right? I know, Bill Swearingen, you're on the line. Hopefully you can hear us right now. But you used to be the CISO over at CenturyLink, and you had to be, frugal. You had to take the limited amount of dollars you had to get to the goals that your organization had, and you had to be objective with that money and frugal with it to get the results you needed.
I mean, I think one thing is that they look through, and then you guys online can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you look at your yearly budget and you look at what you can do with your internal resources. You also have outside resources if you have managed security service providers, consultants, things like that. You're planning all around that, and this is your security plan, right? This is where you come in saying, I need to meet these goals for this year, right? And these postures. How do I, with my internal resources, as well as maybe I have to get external resources to help me out to achieve these goals for this year?
So let's talk about security management then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what's the most effective way to tackle that?
I think, in my idea is that, it's a top-down approach, right? Is understanding kind of your security posture right from the start, right? And looking at your senior management, looking at responsibility initiatives and defining policy governance and organization policies by looking at a top-down approach, talking to the team, seeing what they need to do at a C-level, board of directors level, and then having proper assessments done, right? Having proper assessments done to see where the gaps are. And through that planning gives you...
Yeah. Absolutely. And
what do you think, Joel?
I'm right there with you, right? That top-down approach is going to be key because you have to have and we talk about this later as well, but you have to have the buy-in from senior management. You have to have them leading by example in order to bring security management into play. There has to be a top-down approach.
True. Now let's talk a little bit about governance. Like, how does governance come into play with that? So now you've got your roadmap, you've got your assessment, you're looking at gaps. Now, what about the governance on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that comes back to middle management, right? So, okay, you have senior management, they're on board, they're taking a top-down approach, they want to be hands-on, but then it comes down to the middle management to work with GRC teams, with internal monitoring, with those teams responsible for building security into your governance, right? That's where it's key. So operational managers and the security professionals then must implement those configurations. And that's what it really comes down to. Are you seeing the same thing?
So the configuration, so people know, like, are you talking about actual applied security? Like, we're talking firewalls, endpoint security? Are we just talking policies, procedures, and documentations?
No, it starts with some policy, right? If you want to see, once again, we're going to go through change management later, but really starts through change management. You take and evaluate the risk, and when that change is approved, then it goes through the creation of a policy to ensure that. Then it goes through the changing of whether it's firewall rules, opening certain ports, changing applications, right? And all of that needs to have risk evaluated before it's implemented. So yeah, that's, it's as wide as you want to take it, but you should have security underlying each and every action the organization takes.
Okay. And I think that's important to draw out, because when people are asking about that, like, kind of top down, bottom up approach, and who's actually doing the actual sweat labor of installing the firewall, installing the endpoint, doing that, and who's kind of making the mandate, right? Who's actually controlling, the flow of what's happening. And like you said, that's top down approach. It's upper management, operational management saying this is what needs to be implemented. And this is what we talked about. Like, when one of the points I made in the book is security managers responsible of upper management, not of IT staff, and considered in issues of business operations rather than IT administration. So we're talking about, like, when the middle management and security management is looking at the policies, looking at what's going to be implemented, and then they're making sure those are set so the IT and IT staff can implement.
Yeah, absolutely. We did have a comment from Bill Swearingen on YouTube that he just lost the stream again. I'm showing it live on Restream, but I want to check in one more time. Anybody on LinkedIn, do you guys still have us? Can we get a quick, yep, we're here. This comment is good. This is what you're looking for content-wise. Any comments into what we're talking about? I'd love
I see it live myself on LinkedIn right now, but yeah, okay. I'd love to hear like Dr. Tony is there, who's always awesome. Mark's here, Millie, Sean.
Yeah, and Mark is also a CISSP, so this is a good refresher, but love your feedback on any of the topics that we hit on as well, Mark. You're always a great resource to go to. So we'll give him a second to catch up. I'm not seeing any chat coming through on my side.
Yeah, it seemed they're a little bit behind, but cool. That's okay. I mean,
well, guys, here's the deal. I know bandwidth is rough, so if you are seeing this live and it is super choppy, I am recording it on my end, so I'm going to upload it to YouTube. I'll make sure you guys have the most up-to-date content that's edited. So if you are getting a super choppy connection, I think most of that's my bad, but please come back and revisit that content once we've posted that on YouTube. And then I promise next week I'm going to call darn Comcast and make sure this doesn't happen again.
There we go. Get fiber optics installed.
Oh man, it doesn't come to Cape May Island. They will not do it. I have tried. So anyways, I think we're going to trek on, and I'll kind of crop this out for the people who are going to drop and want to. Looks like Sean still got us on YouTube, so we'll keep trekking forward. Sean, thank you for bearing with us. Is it super, just a quick question and then we'll move on, is it super in and out, or is it pretty consistent on the stream on YouTube, Sean? He may be a few seconds behind, so we'll wait for that, but we'll jump right back in. So we were talking about security management is the responsibility of upper management. And real quick, he says, LinkedIn may be down, but YouTube Live is going great. So thank you, Dave. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you guys. Sorry if you guys are getting a spin and circle. Once again, this whole live stream thing is new to us, but I promise we will continue to work out these kinks and get you a better connection here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, if you refresh, I know on LinkedIn for myself, if you refresh the screen, it seems to be coming through for me. And live, I'm going to kind of have a screen on just one of my other PCs on the side here, and I'm just kind of watching just to make sure it's up. It seems LinkedIn's live is going, and it seems YouTube is going right now. So cool. You guys can see us. I mean, thank you. Thank you so much for the support.
Yep, absolutely. So let's jump right back in, though, because when we talk about security management, we are both in agreement that this is the responsibility, ultimately, of upper management, right? This is correct. Executive level. Security management has to be baked into the whole organization, right? It's not the responsibility of the IT staff, but it's their responsibility to then implement the changes that are brought in from a whole. But then in the end of the day, those changes, they have to be adhered to by the end users, right? If they make a change and then users, it's just, it's makes it more difficult to work, and then they find a bypass for that change, they bypass the security controls as well. So, right, it's back to training for security. It's a whole organizational effort.
And let's talk about that. And this is where comes your governance and your policies, right? To making sure that you have acceptable use policy, you have these policies in place.
That's true.
That and then cybersecurity awareness training on top of that is now enforcing your governance, enforcing these changes and these solutions that you're implementing. So that's where the top-down approach is, to making sure that all these are implemented to make sure your company as a whole is following your maturity program of your cybersecurity program.
Yeah, you're right. So when we talk about the InfoSec team, where should they be built into?
Well, I think the InfoSec team, I mean, you start from the CISO level and you work your way down, right?
Yep. Now, should they be tied to any other departments? Like you hear about DevSecOps a lot, and how you should have security people baked into your dev teams to make sure there's security into every aspect. But then in the content that I'm reading for the CISSP, it's saying the InfoSec team should be autonomous. And I agree, right? So I think autonomous and reporting directly to the CISO, but also working with other teams is key, right? When you hear autonomous, you hear kind of standalone on their own island. But really, they should have their own authority to report directly to the CISO, but they should still have cross-company communications. What are your thoughts on it?
So I think by what I'm reading here is more delegation and management and who do they report, the reporting structure versus engagement into the business itself, right? So when we're reading this, I think it's hierarchy of reporting structure.
Okay.
Right, and who do they report to? Like you know how some companies have the InfoSec team is reporting to the CIO. Right. Or they're reporting to maybe even some, because there's only a chief operations officer, because there is no CISO in the company. So I think they're saying the optimal is the hierarchy of reporting structure is the CISO, controls the whole security program and the security team from a CISO level that's now in the top frame of all the C-suite, and that would be CISO, CIO, COO, CFO, right? That all report to the CEO, right? So it's kind of that structure that I'm seeing as reporting. But I agree with you, and you guys comment, let me know what you guys think, is that the security team needs to be involved in all aspects of the business, right? So when you're looking at roadmap meetings, you're looking at planning meetings or project meetings, security should be involved in all conversations. Yeah,
I agree. So yeah, let us know in the chat, like, where does your security team report to? Is it directly to the CISO? Is it to the CIO? I know at IronNet, we have our internal monitoring reports. There's kind of a dotted line. They report to the VP of the Cyber Operations Center, but then they also work directly with the CISO, right? So there's a little bit of a dotted line where they're part of both structures, but they work. Dr. Tony said 0. And then Sean says there's an inherent conflict of interest when InfoSec reports to IT, and I agree 100%. Have you seen that, Brandon?
So let me ask him that, and talking about Sean with that, is that one because of policies? Is that because of budgetary restraints? Like what is that there's the conflict there? And I'd love to kind of hear his insight. My insight is that a lot of times the budget gets, it gets separated, or it actually is one budget for IT, which now goes for IT infrastructure, but also goes for security. So now it gets half of the security process and things they need to put in, because now they might have to do new systems, updated hardware. They might have to do new internet, like new cloud solutions. So that's all in the IT base, right? But now when you look at security measures, SIM, endpoint security, security training awareness, like all that stuff now their budget gets cut because it's only half of the IT budget, which is under that one umbrella. And I'd love to hear what Sean thinks about that, just because that's what I've seen when security is under the CIO in that IT budget and that IT framework. What have you seen?
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I've seen IT definitely butt heads with the InfoSec teams, and for good reason, right? You have InfoSec saying, nope, that's not secure, you can't do it. And IT is like, but we have to, right? This is what we're doing for our business. Like, we need this to operate in a specific way, and then InfoSec is stopping us. So you're right. When I believe Sean is spot on. When InfoSec reports to IT, you're going to have one person who is biased in one direction or the other. And that's what it comes back to.
And it might not, and let's be fair to these guys, if there's a CIO or someone watching, it might not be by choice. It might be by delegation. We need a cloud solution, right? Security now has to take a back seat to it because we need the pandemic. Now everyone has to go to Azure or Amazon or whatever that means to get the data and all the information. And that's IT. That's an IT spend. Right, so they need the resources, they need to have the licensing and the maintenance agreements and all that. But so now that spends the IT budget, for the quarter or maybe even for the year. So now security doesn't get that, and it's not because they don't want to do security. It's just they only have so much in the budget.
No, yeah, you're spot on. Now, what are a few of the things that when you only have? Okay, so pause. I've also seen organizations, and you touched on it, who only have the CIO or Chief Information Officer, right? So let's talk about that for a second, and we can keep it brief. But let's say you only have a Chief Information Officer, and they're responsible for CISO duties. They're responsible for CSO or Chief Security Officer for like physical security duties. Now, that means they have the IT responsibility, but then they also have the security responsibility, and the organization just isn't big enough to have two separate entities. What do you do then? Because Sean if we're saying, okay, Sean, you're right, but you don't have the resources to divvy up those, what do you do then?
See, my opinion is they have to look at, what they categorize, what's critical in the sense of their roadmap and what they need to do, and then look at the risk of the business, because you got to look at cost centers versus profit centers. You have to look at things that are going to hinder the business potentially for growth. And, for security, a lot of times security, when it's first implemented, it hinders the business until it gets implemented, fine-tuned, and then it starts to open the business back up as you start to see, like we talked about, CIA, confidentiality, data integrity, and availability. The confidentiality and integrity, when it's first installed, generally locks things down. And then they have to slowly open it back up to make things available as they start to open up the policies, they start to open up the ports or whatever that may be. But that takes time from testing and making sure they implement it properly. So on a security standpoint, you look at security can hinder the business. So a lot of times they're slow to move on security, where IT is growth, right? They need websites, they need cloud, they need this, they need that. It keeps the business going, right, and maintaining, which you and I know security does that as well because it protects. But when you look at the business mindset, the business hat you put on, from what I've been seeing is they want to grow the business as fast as possible. They want to bring in more profits. So if it's going to be profitable for the business, e-commerce. Okay, we need to now expand our e-commerce because of the pandemic, more people are shopping online. So now our inventory systems, our accounting systems, let's expand it because that's making us money.
Yeah.
Now security, is that making us money? Well, no, it's protecting us from being breached and going down. But now we're going to implement security a lot slower than the IT solution. So I see a lot of times when they put on that CISO kind of C-suite hat, that's some of the conversations I've been hearing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Sean was just responding to your question earlier. He said budgeting and also reporting, auditing, and monitoring of IT systems and security controls that ultimately report up to the CIO. And then along with separation of duties, right? So separation of duties is key. And that comes back to what are the items that are, these are the items that have to be determined by executives so that you can have separation of duties. You have how security is going to be managed, who's going to be responsible for security, right? Okay, so maybe the CIO manages it, but she can delegate to one individual. Okay, the security is going to be your responsibility. Then also who is responsible for and how will the security be tested for effectiveness? Once again, separation of duties. You don't have the same person who's implementing security test it. Also, the development of your security policies. I think your company does some of that, right? They do manage GRC. Yeah,
we do manage GRC. So just kind of a brief, just a quick overview. Some companies do it internally, right? They have their own people that are government risk compliance and certified, and they kind of work through different compliance. Or sometimes companies are smaller, right, and don't have that resources, and they do it internally, and they get the whatever, if it's PCI, HIPAA, ISO, whatever that may be, they get the compliance up, but they can't manage it throughout the year. So they hire a company like ourselves to either help them to develop it out and manage it throughout the year. Because one of the challenges, and anyone online can contest to this, is that a lot of companies leave it to the end of the year until the auditor comes in, and then the auditor comes in and goes, hey, by the way, I'm going to come and get the certification and put you through an audit. And companies go, oh my God. Now they run around, they have to get the resources, their logs, their documentation, make sure everything's up to date to be able to present that, where my company would all be doing that throughout the year and now presenting it to them. So this is where you get that GRC. If they have an internal team doing it, perfect. And that's, you were talking about resources, or sometimes they outsource it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it looks like Dr. Tony Yvonne said the two domains that need to grow together through strategic planning, combining the corporate objectives and the ISA, or information security architecture. And then Sean also pointed out who's going to implement and audit the controls, right? So absolutely. You guys are spot on.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at the implementing and auditing the controls, sometimes it's good to have a third-party evaluation too. Sometimes you don't want to have the people that have implemented audit it. Right, you want to have a third-party validation, which then just confirms and validates things are done correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about strategic plans, tactical plans, and operational plans. Are you ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Cool, let's do it. So we're going to jump into the next step, and these are some terminology, but also kind of the high level on how the CISSP certification kind of breaks down different planning. So the strategic plan is really your long-term plan. So picture this is going to be your 5-year plan, right? So strategic is your 5-year. Tactical is going to be your midterm. So you're going to break up that 5 years into longer plans. And then operational is really going to be your short-term plans, right? Or your sprints. Now I'll talk strategic, and then I'll toss it over to you, Brandon, for more tactical. But really strategic, your long-term 5-year plan, it's going to help you understand the security function to align those goals, missions, and objectives, right? So you mentioned, okay, we want to take credit card processing, right? We want to build this into our business. We want to scale our online operations over the next 5 years. What does that look like? That should also include a risk assessment, right? So that's going to be your strategic plan. And then from there, that's when you drop into your tactical plans. Over to you, Brandon.
So, I mean, and that's a good point. I mean, and think about that. Sometimes your strategic plan, I wanted to add a little bit to that. Sometimes they take 2-3 years. It's not something that you can do. And I know a lot of CISOs that I've talked to, they might have 1 or 2 plans or projects that are working over the next 2 years, because they're so massive, right? And then through that, like you're saying, PCI compliance and all that, then they come to the tactical, is how do we implement that massive goal, the big goal, the strategic plan. And this is where it comes down, is their midterm development to provide more details and accomplishing the goals set forth in the strategic plan. So that's why you kind of look at the hierarchy of your roadmap and what you're doing. What's our big plan? What do we need to cover? So PCI, and we all know, and people have done PCI is massive. Right, and the things that need to be done for it. So now you look at, okay, what in the actual tactical plan of the technologies and solutions that you need to implement to meet your PCI compliance. So do you need a SIM, right? Do you need security analysts? Do you need resources? You're outsourcing. Do you need, a SOC? All these things you're looking at. And then they talk about in the book, as some examples of tactical plans are project plans, acquisition plans, hiring plans, budgeting plans, maintenance plans, supporting plans, system development plans. So you want to look at like software development or developing your own internal technologies. These are your tactical plans. So talk about operational plans. How does that kind of incorporate into all this now?
Yeah, and I want to touch on one thing. First of all,
Sure.
In the chat, Jessica Boyer, thank you so much for joining us. She also just got a new job in InfoSec, so congratulations, Jessica. And then Tony also said, those strategic plan objectives, some of those are in-house or outsourcing, and that comes back to really you need to update these annually. Right? The strategic plan and tactical plans, these don't have to be fixed plans. If you're updating them annually, you should be a little more agile than putting something in stone for 5 years and coming back to it. Same with tactical plan. If you need to do a mid-year review, first of all, you should probably be doing that with your key employees anyways, but what pivots do we need to take? Where are we winning? Where are we losing? And that gets you into your operational plan. And these are your short-term plans, also known as our sprints, right, in the dev world, but highly detailed planned, based on your strategic tactical plans. Where does this fit in? What are our objectives? How does this prioritize against our other operational plans? And these are monthly, quarterly, potentially even bi-weekly. And you have to continue to do those and update them as often as possible.
So let's kind of talk about them. Those plans generally have a roadmap, key performance indicators, KPIs, benchmarks, milestones, things that you're looking at that you're trying to meet through this process of your planning to make sure you're on target, you're on budget, you have the right resources, you're not going over. So as you're doing this, and you see like a lot of times in the books, they're talking about budgetary requirements, resources, staffing, things like that. So it's all these things that you're meeting through that, and you're reviewing as you're going through and hitting your milestones. Did we hit it? Did we go over budget? Are we under budget? Right? If we're under budget, good. We have more available resources, financial or people, that we can put into the project, and maybe we'll go faster. And like you said, and they talk about in the book, is security is a continuous process, and it's always being evaluated.
Yeah, that's true. And you have to continue to evaluate that. And so when you have an operational plan, right, these small sprints, and you're reviewing those, let's say monthly, and you're talking about your budgetary requirements, your resource allotments, right, who you're going to put on each project, bring security back into that. Make sure that, okay, I'm pulling this person off that. Well, then who's going to do the security review over there, right? You have to continuously bring security back into each and every one of those goals.
So now we're close to the 10-minute mark right now, and I wanted to just check in with everyone. How's everyone finding the information? Are you finding this relevant in what we're covering right now? Comment in the chat box. Let us know. Again, it helps us kind of provide more value and information that we're providing through as we're studying and reviewing this, what you guys are seeing. And we also like to see, what are you guys seeing in the real world? Right? We're talking about stuff that we're experiencing, but we've got Sean's more senior level. I know Jessica, like you said, just started a new job, so she's probably like drinking from the fire hose right now from the CISO telling her all the new things that she has to do. So, and it's kind of interesting. And Joel, talk a little bit about that for yourself. When you get into a new company, Like, is it just a download of information?
Oh, it's wild. So especially let's just take IronNet for example, right? Immediately when I became a new analyst over at IronNet, they dumped me right into the internal monitoring team. Fire hose. You got application management, you have endpoint, you have network monitor, you have all kinds of information flying at you. Plus, it's how does that internal monitoring team work with the CISO, who works with IT, who works with change management, and that whole circle. So it's a ton of information. So Jessica, I feel your pain. You will make it through this. But I'm glad you got off your meeting to join us.
Right, and you have support. You have support here with us, and I think that's why I wanted to bring that kind of full circle. Is that when you have that, you are actually then introduced to the strategic plan, the tactical plan, the organizational plan as you're getting through the fire hose of what the company's trying to do and implement through that year once you start, because they're telling you, like, they're delegating and say, hey, here's our big plan, here's our organizational plan, here's what it looks like, here's what we're working on this year, and here's your part in that, right? And this is where you got that top-down approach from management, is delegating down that, giving you the introduction of what the plan is, and then sharing which teams are working on it, what's the percentage of success or accomplishments, or where they are in certain goals, and they're now going through that. So then when you come on, you know where the company's going, what they're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I say we take it into organizational processes. How are you feeling?
Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. All right, so we're going to give you a little more information, and I do have to tell you, Brandon and I got in our first little tiff at the beginning of this meeting before we kicked off. I was saying, well, everybody knows that, right? Like, we should just skip past that, like, just cut it out. And he goes, no. We're going to have people like Sean who know their stuff, who have been in the industry, people like Bill Swearingen who are digging into this, who have already done it, right? And this may be a refresher for them, but there are people who are just thinking about this in either their new role and may or may not be coming from a business background or a legal background or an InfoSec background. So we have to hit on these points. And so that's why we're putting a lot of information into each and every one of these sessions for you guys. So let's jump in. Organizational processes. Security governance needs to address every aspect of an organization. And we've really been talking about this whole session. But talk to me about a few more organizational processes where you need to bring security to the forefront of the conversation.
Well, I know one of the points they bring up is acquisition and merges, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times when you look at, they do financial overviews, they look at the company's assets, they look at all that. But when you're doing it, look at the organization, your massive levels of risk, right? Such risks include inappropriate information disclosure, data loss, downtime, failure to achieve significant returns on investment. So even some of those areas that you're looking for as you're going through an evaluation of a company, you're either acquiring or you're looking at merging, these are some security things that you have to look at, right? And you have to be aware of, because they could be gaping holes that you're not aware of that you now acquire or merge with them, and now you have a massive issue. You have a massive problem.
Well, let's take a recent example, right? Let's talk about T-Mobile and Sprint for a second. And I know I'm going to eat up a minute doing it, but imagine two 5G providers, right? I mean, they're two of the big five, or big four, right? There's really not that many, but bringing those two mergers together, imagine the size of networks, imagine the size of security teams, imagine the difference in policies that are now becoming a single entity. The amount of risk that they're opening themselves up to due to this merger has to be massive, right? And I know Bill Swearingen and I were talking about that not too long ago. But this is where a healthy dose of security oversight and increased scrutiny is going to be essential to reduce the likelihood of losses during these times.
Oh, and I think that's such a key point to bring up, right? I mean, you have to do that. You have to be the auditor. You have to go through and cross your T's, dot your I's, and look at every aspect of it. And sometimes that's why people hate security guys, because we're the guys that, the house can potentially burn down, and here's the potential, and they don't want to hear that because it's a new shiny toy. They want to buy this. They're thinking this is a great purchase. They've got that, but they don't look at the risk. They don't look at all the asset, where it's us guys coming in going, okay, but what about this? Have you looked at this? Yeah. And we're the ones shining the lights on things that they just don't want to look at sometimes.
Yeah, you're not wrong. So, and I think it's going to be even interesting for them. Imagine having two security teams each trying to audit each other. Oh, I could only imagine.
Now, here's a funny thing, just kind of a sidetrack. I watched the show Suits, and they did a deficiency report. right? And they did efficiency on, there was two companies that were merging. There's two guys doing a deficiency evaluation. What was deficient, it was not efficient to have two guys doing the same report, right? It was a funny kind of like scenario, because if you're doing a deficiency report on the efficiency of the company where they're deficient, you generally have one person doing it. We had two people doing it, so it was inefficient to have two people doing the efficiency report. So it's hilarious to look at that. But here's an example, right? Where then you got combative, right? You got this, conflicting information. And sometimes, like you're talking about, it's better to have a third party evaluation to evaluate that and that come from an outside on both companies, right? So KPMG does that, other companies like that, where they'll come in and evaluate the purchase of the company and all the risk and everything associated and give you a report, because it's a third party evaluation.
Yep. Absolutely. Reduce the bias. All right. So one of the next organizational processes that they go into in the book is divestitures, right? And this is when any form of asset or employee reduction, right? So if your company's going through layoffs, right? We're seeing a lot of companies right now during COVID-19 go through layoffs, and then they're hiring more employees. But during those layoff phases or during removing assets, it's important to increase the amount of security oversight that you have, right? It's a time of increased risk. People leaving an organization, they could be sour, they could have information that is proprietary to an enterprise. You may have to sanitize or sanitize hardware or equipment when you're losing an asset. And by asset, I don't mean a human, right? So you're not sanitizing humans, but to prevent data leakage, right? So if it's hardware, USBs, servers, etc., you need to bring that into account.
Right. No, it's true, right?
My example is terrible, but yeah, it is true.
And the next one they bring up is governance committees, right? Two additional examples of organizations and processes that are essential to strong security governance are change control, change management, and data classification, which I think is very important, especially like when you look at what we're going through the pandemic, right? Looking at change control and everything that's happening, as how fast companies had to go from on-prem employees coming into the office to off-site. Remote users, remote data, right? So that change control and change management happened like overnight, right? And the data classification, if you didn't have that established, what is secret, what is, top secret, what is sensitive, what is, public information. And we're going to talk about that in the next video, in the next session, but really classifying so you understand how to protect it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You are spot on. And I think, Sean, I did start laughing. You said it sounds like a Dilbert cartoon. I could not agree more. That would be a fun one, where he just completely mistakes sanitize and applies it towards something that it wasn't supposed to be applied towards. So, no, I agree. So it sounds like we're keeping change management and change control for our next session. Am I right?
Yeah, we're down to the last 2 minutes. We want to check in with you guys, see if you guys have any questions. Post any questions you guys have in the LinkedIn or YouTube. I think those are the ones we have live right now. So let me ask you, Joel. So for today's session, what's one takeaway that you've got from today? Yeah,
that's a great question. I've thought about the acquisitions and mergers a lot, but until recently, I really didn't think about the I'm going to get this word wrong every single time, but divestitures much. I know here at IronNet, our company went through a round of layoffs as well, and it was hard to see because it was abrupt, right? And it happened very quickly. But looking back at it now, reading through this text, it makes sense why it did. And some of those people were our friends, right? Some of those people I'd worked with for years. But it makes sense. Like when you're going to do that divestiture, you need to make it brief. You need to make it in a controlled environment where the security team has direct insight into everything they're doing. And sometimes those moments are required in order for an organization to grow in the direction it needs to grow. So that's the takeaway I had from digging into this content. How about you, Brandon?
And I think to elaborate on that point, I think the challenge is that some people got laid off. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, and they didn't even know their colleague was laid off. Right? Because what happens, they're not like, when you're in the office and, Joan gets laid off or Jane Doe or John Doe gets laid off, you kind of see they're not in the office. They're not at their desk. Well, they can't see. So if they're not on a Skype meeting or GoTo meeting or Zoom or whatever, now it's like, oh, are they sick? Are they off or whatever? And now it's this kind of, questioning period of, okay, what happened? Like, where are they right now? So I think we go through that now. It's a little bit different, especially with the pandemic. But I think right now, companies that, when it looked at this strategy alone, there was a lot of change happening quickly for a lot of people and a lot of companies. Now I'm looking on the feed right now, and Sean had I think it was a comment. I'm not sure if it's a comment or a question. He's talking about change advisory board. So Sean, let me know if that's a question for you, or you're just kind of making a comment.
Well, I think it may have been a comment.
For my takeaway.
Sorry, I was just jumping in.
Okay.
I think it may have been a comment because we were really starting to talk about change management, change control, and data classification. But really, we're going to dig into the change advisory board next session, and why it's so important to have, and why you need to document that process for auditing purposes. So we will dive into that next time, Sean.
Oh yeah, and there's a whole bunch of like different processes too. Like ITEL is one for change management and all that. So there's a whole different process around there.
Take a peek at what Dr. Tony Yvonne said. She said it's such a security risk, right? If employees don't know if someone's let go, they might open the door for a disgruntled employee, right? Someone shows up when their hands are full, etc. We all know we are not supposed to open the door and everyone should badge in, but there is a human nature factor. That is an interesting perspective that I didn't look at before, Tony. You're right. And, it was for my organization too. Unless you really search through Slack or other communications, you didn't know if somebody was deactivated or not. So it's interesting to try to find, once again, that balance between organizational processes and security. And do you take that risk of somebody badging somebody in who isn't supposed to be there to prevent data leakage if somebody gets disgruntled, right? And you don't let them go. It's a tough call. So, but you're right.
Well, I think what happens is, and I think we have to talk about this just quickly, is when someone gets laid off, there has to be a process that they go through. There has to be kind of a shutting down their accounts, deactivating their access badge, making sure there's an email that goes out to the whole, teams as well as the employees, to let them know that, Joan's no longer with the company, whatever that may be, because there has to be that education. Because what, Dr. Tony was, and we all know this, is that's tailgating, right? When you have someone kind of going, oh yeah, my hands are full, let me in the building, they may be carrying a box. That's one of the things that I learned even just through physical security that you have to be mindful of, is because that's how people compromise the physical security aspect of it, right? When they try to get into a building, or they go and smoke with a group of people. They might not know them, and then they follow them into the building, right? And then also now they're in, right? So, when you're looking at, when people are getting laid off and things are happening that side, you have to have the process of how that is educated and relayed to everyone that needs to implement security as well as the teams, right? Now, going back into myself, what did I get from this conversation today is really kind of looking through the different planning, operational plan, tactical plan, strategic plan, and really thinking on a business level, not just an IT, not just as a, cybersecurity person, but looking as a business person, how for like the forecasting, the financial forecasting, the planning, the strategic thing, understanding kind of the whole thing from a top-down approach, kind of really reminded me of the things that I deal with day in and day out, of talking to clients and what they're dealing with, and just reminds me how important it is to learn it from that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, and I think that's a great takeaway as well. Let's continue to, as we go throughout the session, take that planning strategy and implement it into all the things we're going to learn about, right? Change management, etc. So thank you guys. This has been Breaking into the CISSP Domains with Joel Bork and Brandon Krieger. This was show number 2, and we appreciate you guys saying. Brandon, please say goodbye to our audience.
Oh, thank you guys. I want to thank everyone that's watched this and give us the thumbs up, as well as comment and below. I really appreciate kind of the feedback, and Sean, all of them, Sean, Dr. Tony, who else have we got here? Jessica, she chimed in a little bit. Everyone that's given us feedback, thank you so much. It's really good to kind of get that real world scenarios, what you guys are dealing with, and have that kind of engagement of people that are working through the industry. So thank you so much.
That's it. Hey, Brandon, thank you so much. It's always an honor doing these with you, and I look forward to our next few sessions.
Same here, Joel.
See you, Brandon. Have a great night, everybody.